Hi, I'm John Joyce. I'm the Access and Communications Coordinator in the Office of Access and Disability Services, or ADS, at Dickinson. Our office facilitates accommodations for students who have a need for any type of accommodation in the academic, dining, or residential environments. Accommodations might be based on any number of disabling factors, such as a medical condition, a learning difference, a mental health diagnosis, ADHD, or any other neurodevelopmental, psychological, physical, or other disability. Back in the spring of 2020, ADS Dean and Director Marnie Jones, Dickinson Senior Tenzin Crowley, and I gave a webinar to incoming first-year students interested in learning about our office. I presented some potential myths about disclosing a disability that Marnie and Tenzin then dispelled, and I'm going to share those with you. So if you were a student who had accommodations in high school, or if you're considering whether to request accommodations at Dickinson, I think you'll find the following information helpful. I'm going to play a few minutes from that webinar, and then I'll wrap it up by explaining the process for confidentially disclosing a disability and requesting accommodations. Here's Marnie Jones.
Okay, let's get started. So you might be thinking some things that many Dickinson students have thought as well. So we want to share some of those common myths with you. So let's start with this one.
The ideal would be for me to wait to see how things go before I disclose a disability to ADS.
So what do you think about that, Tenzin?
I would say that's probably not a great idea. I think that the sooner you get involved with the disability services, then you can kind of like get ahead of your Dickinson education. So you can really take it on as it comes.
Yeah, and we found actually that 3 years ago we did a little study and we found that about 20%, about 102 students in a graduating class is registered with ADS and eligible for accommodations. But as you can see by these two slices of the pie, only about half of those students, 50, had disclosed before starting at Dickinson. So what that meant was that they had been eligible for accommodations in high school, but chose not to use their accommodations. And we did a little study to see what the impact of that was. And we found that there was quite a discrepancy between those who were eligible to use accommodations and used them versus those who didn't. It was about the difference between a B+ and an A-. So as Tenzin says, it's not only important in terms of you setting things up early, but you also don't need to use accommodations if you disclose and request them. You can disclose and request them and just decide to have them there and available, but better to have it all set up in the beginning than to wait and then have to scramble to set them up.
I won't have control over who knows about my diagnosis or who knows about my eligibility for accommodations.
What would you say to that, Tenzin?
It's not true. Even your advisor as you come into the college doesn't know until you choose to disclose your accommodations, which is something I was very surprised about. Because, in high school, kind of all the adults know before you do. And in college, it's really about like you taking ownership of your education and you deciding who knows what.
Yeah, and so Tenzin is actually going to be in one of the groups that goes from transitioning how we used to do paper forms to now we're going to be doing all disclosing of eligibility for accommodations online, but students are still going to have the same accommodation letter. It's just going to be electronic instead of paper forms. So when you give your accommodation letters to your professors, Tenzin, does it include any information about your diagnosis?
No, it just says like what accommodations are like relevant for me or like that I have access to.
Right. So, and in this new system, students will have an ability online to see each of the accommodations for which they're eligible and then to click disclose to faculty. So you'll be in the complete driver's seat of being able to know who knows what about your eligibility.
Another one is my eligibility for accommodations will appear on my transcript or my academic record.
Tenzin?
It doesn't.
Okay, absolutely not. It will not, never will. And it will, as Tenzin said, not only are you in charge of who you share your eligibility for accommodations with, but even if you share your eligibility with your faculty, it will never appear on your transcript or your academic record. It's completely confidential.
My professors will think less of me if they know that I'm eligible for accommodations.
Have you found this to be the case, Tenzin?
A lot of students have accommodations at Dickinson. And so every professor that I've ever had is really used to having students come and like get their accommodations from them. So it's not like a dirty word, or it's not something that people are going to frown upon you for having.
Yeah, and we share with faculty numbers and percentages of students who graduate with awards, prizes, dean's lists, and there's consistently been a high representation of students with disabilities among those populations. So I think faculty are well aware of this, and they also know that students who have accommodations have had to overcome a challenge, right? So they understand that these are students who are, as we like to say, barrier hurdlers, right? They understand that you're contending with a challenge and still achieving at the level that you made it to Dickinson, so they generally have a really high esteem of students who not only are eligible for accommodations, but who are savvy enough to be using them.
So if you'd like to see the full webinar, we're going to be adding that to our webpage, which is just dickinson.edu/ADS. And on our page, you'll see more information about the process for disclosing and documenting. That can be found right here. The link is disclosing and documenting on the left side of the page. And you'll see the steps that you'll need to take in order to do that. Also on this part of the web page is a link for types of accommodations. You can see the kinds of accommodations that we provide to students, and each one of these is a link that will give you additional information about how to disclose and what kinds of documentation would be appropriate for that kind of accommodation. In the meantime, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. My email address is just access@dickinson.edu. And you can reach out with any questions that you have that have come up during this video, or questions that you might have in the future. Thanks, and hope you have a great first semester at Dickinson.